Eric, thanks for speaking with Meet the Startup today. We very much appreciate your time. We are big fans of your work, have read the book carefully, and use principles that you talk about in our daily entrepreneurial lives. So thanks for your work. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
Um, the first question that we have is we're now hearing the term lean startup really on a daily basis at this point. It's almost reaching a buzzword status.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think a lot of people are using the term loosely who may not have read the book. They use it a lot of different ways that I've heard.
Yeah.
So, once and for all, could you give the audience a good definition of what you're talking about with the lean
Huh?
startup?
The word lean comes from lean manufacturing, which was a system of management that was developed originally in Japan with the Toyota production system. And at the heart of lean manufacturing was a principled approach to figuring out which activities a company does are value creating and which ones are actually waste. And it turns out that when you turn that critical eye on most corporate procedures, you discover that actually most of what they do doesn't matter to anybody. It's totally wasteful. And it's called lean because when you take a supply chain and you eliminate all that waste, it's like you put the whole company on a diet. You actually use a lot less resources, a lot less energy is poured into stuff that doesn't make a difference. So we wanted to take that same concept of figuring out the difference between value and waste and apply it to entrepreneurship. But there's a catch. The heart of modern management, of all lean systems, it's all about viewing the work that you do through the eyes of your customer. Whatever the customer cares about is value, and whatever the customer doesn't care about is waste. Here's the problem. Entrepreneurs usually don't know who their customer is. And so, whose eyes are we supposed to look at our procedures through? We don't know yet. So, my contention is that a startup's principal function is to learn how to build a sustainable business. And that learning is the value. Everything else is waste. And so, lean startup is a disciplined methodology for building companies and new products where we rigorously and systematically try to figure out how do we learn as quickly and efficiently as possible how to build a sustainable business, and we eliminate everything else from our process, everything else from our company that might seem like a good idea but does not contribute to the learning we seek.
Got it. Thanks. One of the things that I hear in that context is around funding for startups and the statement that, well, VCs are relatively speaking less important in the world of the lean startup. But I don't think that's the case. And I think that's mixing concepts once again.
Yeah. See, that here's where people get confused.
Yep.
Lean startups are more capital efficient. So
Mhm.
they don't waste money in the volumes and gobs that we used to see in the old style startups. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we don't raise money or that we don't have a lot of resources. If you think
Right.
about a star athlete who's very lean, they probably take in a lot of calories every day because they have a body that metabolizes food really efficiently compared to the rest of us. So that same metaphor I think is applicable for companies. If we can use capital more efficiently, we actually can raise more of it and put it to work in a better way.
Right. Um, we're located in Portland, Oregon, and there's a pretty new but yet vibrant startup scene. Do any of the principles that you're talking about with the lean startup make it perhaps relatively more easy to start a company in other markets? And more specifically, do you have any particular advice for companies in kind of the second tier markets like Boulder and Austin and Portland and even Seattle?
Oh yeah. What has struck me, probably the biggest surprise I've had doing this lean startup thing full time is the number of cities that have an active lean startup meetup group. Actually, Portland was one of the earliest ones, has one of the most active groups, disproportionate really to the size of Portland, on the startup scene in general. And I've seen that pattern a lot that because what we're trying to do is demystify and democratize the tools of entrepreneurship themselves. These ideas actually have a disproportionate impact away from the famous places like Silicon Valley, because in Silicon Valley, there's money running, like crazy. There's a lot of companies being funded. Entrepreneurship is in every street corner. It's our practically our national pastime here, and so a lot of the older ideas are much more deeply entrenched. People are actually making a lot of money selling the old models and doing a lot of hype and you guys watch if you read TechCrunch for even 2 minutes, you'll see there's these entrepreneurs who've done this a bunch of times. They hype up a company, they sell it, they get out, they make a lot of money, regardless of whether the company actually creates any value for anybody. There's a lot of money to be made. Well, when you drain the swamp of that kind of behavior, what I call success theater, it's all this nonsense we do to make ourselves look like we're successful. When you drain the swamp of that behavior, it leaves only the pure activity of creating value for customers. And so, in a place where that's the primary focus, these ideas actually can be much more impactful.
Mm-hmm.
There was a time, remember the old Karl Marx saying about how the bourgeoisie owned the means of production, and that was their lever of control over society. Well, we are now in an era where anybody can rent the means of production, which is really a radically different model than the old capitalist system. So we're in a new place where anybody who's got a credit card and access to, $100 can get started in building a first experiment. And those experiments are cheap, they're quick, so we can run lots of different experiments to see what works and what doesn't, and we don't have to get anybody's permission. So when people talk about the democratization of entrepreneurship, that's what it means. It means literally every person in an affluent society like America can take a stab at entrepreneurship at any time without having to go beg some gatekeeper for permission for access to scarce resources.
Great. There's a lot of incubators that we see and incubator-like programs popping up. Some of the most famous ones, Y Combinator, for example. In Portland, we have Pi, which is started by Wyden and Kennedy. We have the Portland Seed Fund, for example. What do you think of the whole incubator startup scene? That seems like it's really kind of blown up.
Well, I think it's a good thing overall, even though I believe that, I often say winter is coming, just to be prepared to remember. So when winter comes, a lot of these incubators are going to go away. They're going to be proven to be not value creating. So I do think we have to proceed a little bit cautiously. But I think the general idea of startup schools, of places where people can go to hone their entrepreneurial craft, that can entice people who might not have become entrepreneurs to join the entrepreneurial ecosystem instead of becoming a banker or a lawyer or what have you. I do think those are generally a positive influence overall. And the more meritocratic we can make them, the more open we can make them, the more likely we will be to see them actually create value instead of just more hype.
Great. So here's another question. The lean startup methodology talks about building the minimum viable product, testing it, iterating, learning. That cycle can go on literally forever, right? So when do you advise an entrepreneur to shut it down and go in another direction and quit versus iterate?
Well, I never advise quitting. In my experience is entrepreneurs only fail one speed, full speed right into the wall, leaving a cutout of the shape of their company in the wall itself. So the more difficult thing is to know when to pivot and when to persevere. Because what happens is when we're getting modest levels of success, like when you have an idea, even if it's terrible, there's usually some customers who want it. There's usually some interest. That's actually pretty dangerous because then you can convince yourself that even your terrible idea, well, at least somebody likes it, so you should keep going. And a big part of the book is actually laying out a quantitative framework for a new kind of accounting to try and measure whether we're making progress, whether we're trending towards product market fit or not, so that we can make these pivot decisions in a cool and rational way instead of in the doom and gloom, disaster last minute scenario. We can actually just periodically, systematically evaluate, hey, is our vision coming to fruition through this strategy? And if it's not, let's try a new one.
Mm-hmm. Great. So let me ask you about one of my favorite companies of all time, Apple. They seem to take the opposite approach of the lean startup, building things in secret labs, information tightly controlled. I'm guessing not talking to many customers, yet they're wildly successful. Is the Apple approach the antithesis of the lean startup, and why does it work there, if so?
The truth is, I don't know. You said a very funny thing. You said we guess that there's not a lot of customers involved.
Right.
And Apple PR does go out of their way to tell everybody that they never talk to customers. But is that really true, or is that just a PR message? I don't know. The thing that is tricky is that even if that model, even if what we think we know about Apple was true, even if they in fact just figure things out on their own in secret and then launch, that works because of who they are, the success that they have, the brand that they've established, the platform that they already have, and the deep customer intimacy that they've developed over many, many years. When people think about trying to become the next Steve Jobs, they want to be, in their mind's eye, the person who got up on stage and launched the iPad. That's our image. But the Steve Jobs I admire is the far more courageous person who tried to sell the Apple One. A hobbyist homebrew computer kit that was your classic minimum viable product. When you've already been successful for decades, it's pretty easy to get up on stage and convince people that your next great thing is going to be great and get people to invest in your ecosystem along with you. It still takes courage, but I think what takes tremendously, way more courage is to be able to say with a straight face, this homebrew computer club hobbyist thing, this is going to be big someday, and you should, invest along with me in that situation. And so I think if entrepreneurs want to follow the Apple way, they got to go back to the roots and start at the beginning. Find your Steve Wozniak and build your Apple One. You get to the iPad eventually, but one step at a time.
Right. Great. So, are there broader implications for the lean startup model, say in the world of education or politics?
Everywhere that people are facing high uncertainty about what to do, I think these ideas can apply. And education, especially politics, especially, these are areas where massive disruption is needed. The current system is not working well in our modern, rapidly changing world, and it's going to be entrepreneurs, I believe, who find the solution. So yeah, I'm a big believer in applying these ideas any place where we face high uncertainty about what to do, where taking a systematic approach to discovering the right answer could be helpful.
Great. And as for you, what's next? You're going to do another startup, join a VC, start a cult?
Hopefully none of those things, although, yeah. Listen, this thing has taken over my life in a way I never anticipated or expected. It has become a startup. I think every day about the mission of this company, which is really to change how people build new companies and build new products. And everywhere I look, I see tremendous, tremendous waste with people following the status quo model. So I really believe deep down that there is a massive economy-wide change that needs to happen. And every time I feel like I have a chance to make an impact with that problem, I feel like, right, that's a day well spent. So we'll see.
Great. And finally, when can we get you to come up to Portland?
Hey, when I'm invited, drop me an email.
Okay, good. We'll make that
Awesome.
happen. So thanks for your time.
Hey,
Really, really appreciate it.
thanks for having me on.
Okay, thanks, Eric.
Take care.